Good morning. This is Natalie Gilly with the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. I'm joining you from Bemidji, Minnesota here as a Greater Minnesota Program Manager, and I welcome everyone to the webinar today. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. So today's webinar, we're going to be talking about biking and walking to bridge the digital divide. Today is September 16th, 2020, and this is the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network. I wanted to just bring this back to the front here to remind everyone today, hopefully you're where you are intending to be at this time. The purpose statement for our Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network is to connect local bike walk leaders to share stories and ideas about how they're lifting up the walking and biking culture in their communities. So just something to bring back everyone to the purpose of this network webinar and how we're bringing the leaders together and what we're hoping to accomplish as part of this network. So thanks for being here today. We have Russell Haberman and Ted Duepner today as our speakers. And if you guys would like to type your name and your location and what device you're zooming on today into the chat box, we'll take a look at that and welcome you to the webinar. So just a little housekeeping before we get started today. We have BikeMN webinars on the third Wednesday of the month from 11:30 to 12:30. Today we're talking about bridging the digital divide. In October, we'll be discussing the topic of equity and data collection. And then if you would like to put on your calendar, save the dates for November 18th and December 16th. Those will be the final two webinars we have for 2020. So thank you everyone for participating in the chat box. To introduce yourselves, I want to just mention a couple of places we have people joining from: Fergus Falls, Hutchinson, Minneapolis, Proctor, New Ulm, Woodbury, Duluth, Jackson, Anoka, a couple more Duluth people, Randall, Detroit Lakes, Plymouth. It's great to see people from all over the state, Northfield. So it looks like a lot of people are running this webinar today from their laptop, and there's a couple of unique answers here in the chat box as well. So thanks for your participation in this exercise. So it's an introduction to the topic today, and welcome everyone. So just before we get started with our first speaker today, I want to share a little bit about the Safe Routes to School Network. The Safe Routes to School Network also holds a monthly webinar led by Jill Chamberlain. In October, they'll be holding the webinar on October 8th from 10 to 11, and they'll be discussing opportunities for speed reduction, and Ethan Foley with the City of Minneapolis will be a featured speaker. They will also be providing some updates from MnDOT. So if you're not already connected to that network, feel free to reach out and join there and join their webinar on October 8th. So I'm really excited to showcase the community today of Proctor, Minnesota. As you know, each month we feature a spotlight community, and today we're going to go to the northeastern part of the state of Minnesota to shine a light on Proctor. So our first speaker today is Russell Haberman. He's a senior planner at the Arrowhead Regional Development Commission, which is based in Duluth. Russell helps with transportation, including active transportation planning in Northeast Minnesota. He's a lifelong resident of Proctor, which is a very walkable and extremely tiny city just outside of Duluth. Welcome to the webinar, Russell.
Thank you, Natalie. I think I'll just kind of kick things off here if this is all right. There's a picture of me. I'm Russell. Nice to see you all. And I'll be talking about the Proctor History Walk today, which I am a professional planner for our RDC based out of Duluth here, but this was a personal project I did a few years back. So my question that I wanted to answer is, can a pre-pandemic digitally inclusive walking promotion project inform your virtual walking event today? You betcha, because it's Minnesota. So let's just jump right in with the next slide. The first question I need to answer is, where is Proctor? Because everybody says, you know, oh, I haven't been to Proctor when I say that I'm from there. And I say, if you've been to Duluth, then you've been to Proctor. Because if you're driving on I-35 or coming from the west side of the state, you'll either be taking I-35 or Highway 2, which comes right through Proctor on your way to Duluth. If you're on I-35 and you crest the hill, you're just leaving Proctor and you see the bay and the beautiful setting. So that's where we are, right on top of the hill there. Now on the next slide, this is how I see Proctor. This is actually a photo I took from 2013. And I'm an avid walker. I like to see, you know, go and see what's going on in the city every day, bump into a lot of people on my way. But eventually, since I am a lifelong resident, I kind of started to wonder, you know, I feel like people with their cities kind of develop relationships over time, and you get to know the history as well. And so I started to look at old photos of Proctor. And I would see on the next slide photos like this, you know, of people walking and biking and crowding the streets. And I thought it was really interesting. And I was eventually inspired by a public artist whose name is Candy Chang. And one of her most famous works is the Before I Die wall, which is, it's a fill in the blank exercise in a public space where you can say, before I die, I want to do this or that. And she also did a project on Governor's Island in New York, which was a timeline of the island's history. And I thought, back in 2015, I thought that would be a really cool thing, because as I was out walking, it's cool to see evidence of the history over time, but it helps to see the narrative as well. And so what I developed was the Proctor History Walk. I started to develop an idea for how in Proctor we might implement something similar to that, that walking timeline, which was, in Candy Chang's version, it was paint on stencils on the sidewalk that said, in this year, this is what happened, and it had a little image with it. That wasn't necessarily going to work in Proctor. Our sidewalks aren't great, and they're pretty old and cracked, and it's not a great surface to put a piece of artwork really on. And so I had experience with tactical urbanism, specifically with temporary signage. And so I figured, you know, I've already gone down this road creating these plastic temporary signage with another project. How about I put history on there? And so on this next slide, you'll see this is what we ended up coming up with. And when I say we, I mean me. So these were placards that were placed along the sidewalk at different historical places in town where there is currently something historic, or there used to be. And on the next slide, you'll see we created a network of, you know, along sidewalks where these would be. Fortunately, a lot of the things were in the same common core throughout the city, which is pretty common throughout different cities in Minnesota, and particularly older cities like Proctor is. And the next slide. And I also wanted to create a base. And so there was an empty vacant storefront in the middle of downtown Proctor. It has since been filled, thankfully. But in the meantime, we put in installation with some historic photos, a blown up version of the signage people would see along the street with the story of what the Proctor History Walk is, and the map as well, so people knew what they were doing and where they were going. It kind of added a little bit of life to the street as well. Of course, this is about, you know, bridging the digital divide too. So in addition to that analog version where it's the signs on the street and the storefront that's decorated, we also created a website, and this is still live. It's called proctorhistorywalk.org if you're interested in checking it out. And it took the stories from each of those different historic markers and created a long form, and also shared some photos of those different spaces throughout history in the town. So next slide. And there were a couple lessons learned from it. And I think this is the kind of driving point that I want to share today, is that when you're trying to create a walking promotion program, or I guess a biking promotion program too, I think it's a good general guideline that you want to meet people where they currently are. In this context of bridging the digital divide, there were two really audiences of people here. One are the people that were already walking throughout the community and might want to know a little bit more about the history. And then there are a second group of people who really are viewing the community from their phone or their laptop screen. And they might stumble across this when we're promoting it online. And I guess the goal is that that divide between people who are on the street and people who are behind their computer, not necessarily interacting with the built environment, can come together and maybe even cross paths along the way. And my second lesson learned was that sometimes we hear about developing our streets for programs for our most vulnerable users. And in our world, some of these vulnerable users are not so tech savvy individuals. And so I would say to design for them first. In this iteration, this program, what I ended up doing was starting with that on-street signage and having a base at that storefront, and then building it off of that and extending it into the digital world. So I would say that just like you're designing your streets and programs for the most vulnerable user, do that with your programs as well. And then next. So I wanted to share what we're doing right now. Safe Kids Northeast Minnesota is an organization I'm involved in. And, you know, we've done and promoted walk to school day events in the past, and this year is going to be a little bit different. And one of the big incentives in doing some of these events is, you know, gathering and getting together with your friends and neighbors. And that's not an incentive that can be done this year. So we're thinking creatively, and we're offering a sticker to those people who participate in the Duluth area. If you like the sticker, I'm sorry they're not available across the state right now, maybe someday. But I think there's ways to develop our programs, walking, biking, what have you, and, you know, figuring something out. So I think with that, if I don't know, Natalie, if you want to do questions now or save them for the end or what, but.
Thanks, Russell. Thanks for sharing all this information. And this is great. I know that there's probably other people that are on the call that are interested in the stickers you've shared on the slide about Walk to Anywhere Day. I think they're really cool. And I do appreciate, being from Bemidji, that you have featured Paul and Babe. Thanks for the nod to that. And I really, this topic about bridging the digital divide is so relevant right now. If you joined us in August for the education webinar, you know, today was kind of a continuation of how is technology working for us, and especially with some of these walking events and initiatives, how are we making this accessible and the information available. And so this is great information, and we can pause right now to take a few questions for Russell. I see that we have a couple in the chat box, and others, if you're on audio, either on the phone or on your computer, you will need to unmute yourself to ask a question, and we'll turn it over to Russell to respond to any questions you might have for him.
Yeah, I'll start with some of them in the chat box. Michelle Kiefer. That picture behind this current one is of a walk to school day back in 2017. So that was, I think, a really great shot. Michelle Pearson, I designed the sticker. Thanks for the shout out. You already knew that. But I'm a terrible self-promoter. Yeah, and I was really responding to your comment, Luke. I was really inspired by different cities that have done it. Actually, a few years before I designed this program, I was out the East Coast, in upstate New York, and they have a lot of history out there. And they also are great at sharing their history and bringing it to the streets. And I think that's so great. And there's definitely more of a culture of walking out there in the bigger city and where it's more prevalent. And so I kind of wanted to bring a piece of that back with me. That was, instead of buying something, that's kind of my thing that I brought back. And fortunately, I was able to share it with my own community as well.
That's awesome.
Follow-up question, if I can.
Yeah.
The signage that I saw along the sidewalk in that picture of the kids walking to school, can you say more about that? I think what I saw on the sign or the placard was "put your phone down." Was that right? And
Yeah.
when did you do those signs, or when was that event?
This must have been 2017. We were doing a Safe Routes to School plan in Proctor at the time, and we partnered with our local Safe Kids coalition to put on the event. And one of their things is about distracted walking. So it says heads up, phones down.
Okay.
And so we had those along. It was in addition to folks who did live within the school vicinity, we did a bus drop and walk as well. There's a community center behind us about a half mile. So that's where they dropped off. And then there were those yard signs along the way there. Yeah.
Thank you. I like them. Maybe if you still have them, put them out again.
Yeah, I think we do. And I have a Safe Kids meeting right after this, so I'm sure we can bring it up. And then Michelle Pearson, do the middle high school teachers use the walk-in curriculum? I do know there was a walk bike fun curriculum training in Proctor a few years back, and there were a few educators involved with that. I would have to follow up with them and see. That's a good question. And in the digital world, I'm not sure what the status is on that either, so that would be interesting. Yes, so I'll leave that there. I think if you think of anything else, we're going to do a Q&A at the end of this as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for the questions, and thanks, Michelle, for plugging in with some of this Walk Bike Fun and the Walk to Anywhere Day. And Russell, we appreciate you bringing walking back from the East Coast. And it's interesting that you moved from such a large metro to the small, tiny town of Proctor. However, it's walkable, and it's exciting to have you here in Minnesota.
Oh, I've been here in Minnesota. I was just visiting the East Coast.
Oh, you're just visiting the East Coast. Okay, well, thanks for bringing these things back. So, so Proctor, Minnesota, if you haven't heard about it or you haven't been there, well, as Russell mentioned, you probably have and may not have even known it. Hopefully this is giving you a little insight to how walkable it might be and is, and you might experience that. So like Russell mentioned too, at the end we'll have a Q&A for both Russell and for Ted if you guys have any other questions for him at that time. So again, we're just continuing the conversation about how do we create events and walking and biking initiatives that are accessible, that provide information to people in a way that's people can get access to these resources, and in ways that you don't have to spend a lot of money to buy a really high-tech device to be able to participate. And Russell shared a few things, and I will welcome our second speaker here in just a moment, and then he will be sharing about biking. So our second speaker today is Ted Duepner. He's our supporter relations manager here at the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. He's been using his bike as a main source of transportation year-round in Minnesota since 2003, including 15 years, I mean to add more years on there for you, Ted, but 15 years of commuting, 20 plus miles per day, while the most rewarding job he had was being a playground lunchroom supervisor at an elementary school for 10 years. He has always strived to incorporate bicycle advocacy and encourage ridership whenever he has found himself. Legitimizing cycling and walking transportation has been and remains a central component of his identity. When not on his bike, you may find him canoeing, hiking, fishing, hunting, playing yard games, losing at board games, and foraging for wild foods or pretty rocks. So you can see in the picture that he has on here, right on the screen now, that includes one of these activities that he enjoys. So welcome to the webinar, Ted.
Hey, yeah, thanks again for asking me to do this, Natalie. That's great. You can probably just go ahead and click to the next one as well. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to highlight, some of the things that I often work backwards when it comes to bikes. I'm like, okay, I like this activity. How can I bring biking to that? And so thus far, I've figured out how to go deer hunting, ice fishing, carry a couple 100 pounds worth of groceries, go camping, and now I figured out how to train my dog to love bike rides too. So if you want to see lots of pictures of that dog, find me on Strava too, because that's been a lot of my riding lately since I'm otherwise working from home. Go ahead and we'll get to the next slide too. So any of you who are reasonably familiar with the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota, we kind of have some flagship events, and those have changed a little bit over the years, but the ones that are probably people are most familiar with are in this list. So you can and this is oftentimes the first interaction a lot of the public has with Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. So they might not know anything else we do, but they know that we host the St. Paul Classic, or they're familiar with the Mankato River Ramble or something like that. So so these are a few pictures from that. These are really large events. St. Paul Classic can bring over 6,000 people to the streets of St. Paul. It's a really, really massive volunteer effort and that sort of thing too. So, we kind of went back and forth on like, what does this look like? What's this timeline? Nobody really knew. We were looking to others as well. And so this kind of gave us an opportunity to kind of, think about what else we can envision. So go ahead and click the next one. So, and this was kind of the struggle, right? Is how do you kind of capture some of the popularity and momentum of an in-person event, and how can that possibly translate to something that people are kind of doing up by themselves, maybe not even in the same locations, things like that. So the elements of your in-person, right? You've got a closed course, often to automobile traffic. You've got a specific route. So, most of these, events, I've never looked at a map because I can see where everyone's going. It's clearly marked and zoned off. I can just enjoy the ride, really, carefree. Amazing rest stops. I definitely have never had a calorie deficit when I'm at the St. Paul Classic. I probably eat like 8 cookies and, drink 12 cups of coffee. It's one of my favorite times of the year. Actually, I just pulled up, and you get those Facebook reminders of like, things in the past. It pulled up a picture of me 9 years ago when I was volunteering at the St. Thomas rest stop. So definitely been something I look forward to. And of course, the social element, riding with thousands of other cyclists or other advocates, live music, all that sort of thing too. So those are the elements there. And so go ahead and go to the next one there, Maya. So what we've seen is, this is not unique to us, right? There's tons of events that we're trying to quickly pivot to virtual or just completely canceled, right? So, we kind of did both. We canceled our events. So we didn't necessarily try and make them into something they weren't, but we were really looking at what are other people doing, for their virtual events. Are they calling it something else? Is it the same thing? And a lot of them did, so RAGBRAI, very, very popular right across Iowa. They kept the same name, and they pivoted to this, very, very similar but they had mileage requirements. They had, short time spans to accomplish those, required using apps, their merchandise, And you know, a lot of other events were races. That's where we saw like a lot of successes where runners have like trained for something. They really want to see their numbers. They want to compare themselves and things like that. So that's where you know, a lot of those apps and things like would come into play. We also saw some really high registration fees, which was surprising, given all those other elements, like I mentioned, in in-person events, that people kind of know at least a little bit more where their money is going. It's a little bit harder to figure out, you know, particularly for some of these organizations aren't, you know, necessarily doing a lot of advocacy, or maybe they have a charitable element or something like that. But a number of them just kept their same price structure, and you know, which was kind of an eye opener for us. All right, go to the next one then. So so we laid out you know, something called the BikeMN Classic, and if you haven't heard of it, we want to know. If you participated, we want to know. We're going to send out a survey to a lot of people in our network because you know, we're trying to do our evaluation now. But these are really the three main goals, right? We're like, okay, where do our in-person events fall short? Like, what are we missing? What are the inequitable components of it, or barriers, and how could we possibly address them with something like this? So of course, accessibility is always going to be an issue. So we decided to go without a registration fee, no mileage requirements. I'm sure a lot of people here have very nice, well-functioning bicycles, but if anybody has ever gotten on a very, you know, poor fitting or you know, poor functioning bicycle, riding that for 30 miles in a day isn't necessarily fun. It might turn you off from cycling completely. But you know, if we're going to try and encourage people just to ride around the block who might not otherwise do it, we consider that a win. Geographic barriers. You know, although a lot of our events are kind of like, you know, moving to other areas around the state, you know, of course, you still have to get there. So, and we know that for the St. Paul Classic, River Ramble, some of these others, we know that some people are driving really far to get there, but that's not something everybody can do, of course. And then equity in graphics and marketing. This is something we really, really tried to emphasize. I'm actually wearing our graphics t-shirt. I'm really happy with how that turned out. And you can see those on our event page too, on our website. But really trying to make, you know, without like it seeming like patronizing, we're trying to be like as inclusive as possible, and make sure that everybody knows that we're just having like this fun event that all should participate in. And then we wanted to engage people, reach new audiences. And so that led us to like, what are the channels that we have not been utilizing? We want to encourage younger generations of cyclists, and we want to see participation across Minnesota. And then of course, fun. One of the main things, you know, that has always been a part of BikeMN is like, how do we you know, keep it linked to, you know, walking and biking, you know, and rolling across Minnesota are fun, associated with fun activities. So we wanted to get a lot of pictures of people enjoying their bikes, great prizes, month-long participation, and that sort of thing. Okay, we can go to the next one. So yeah, so this concluded. So we did 4 weeks of like photo themes, and we got some awesome content. And I see a few of you on here did participate and sent us some stuff, which is great. It was super fun for us to see. But the main thing we learned is we have a lot to learn. And that is, you know, these, you know, and you know, even like the whole like title of this webinar, right? I'm talking about virtual events, you know, like I'm a kid of the 80s and 90s. You know, virtual to me meant like virtual reality. It was not an activity you were actually doing. You know, it was like you were like pretend you were wearing a headset, and it's like you're in another world or something. So, you know, it's kind of hard to say because, like, you know, a lot of these activities, like RAGBRAI required you to ride 70+ miles a day. Well, that's something you're actually doing. You're not virtually doing that. You know, you're just not doing it, you know, with everybody else, maybe in Iowa or something like that. So trying to like really communicate what a good message is, what we're offering people, and why they should participate. I think that that's something we still need to go more forward. We can be more accessible. That's always going to be true, but we you know, in our just kind of snapshot evaluation, we know that that's true. We could certainly add walking and rolling elements to that. And that rolling, you know, for those with like a limited mobility and that sort of thing. And, you know, skateboarding, scootering, like, you know, we don't care. We want active, engaged, healthy communities, right? So, and then, you know, the other thing we learned is there is no really virtual replacement for the real thing. And that's actually a good thing. You know, we want people to look forward to our in-person events. We still want that engagement. We want to see people face to face. And we know this is just not a good time to do that. But it was kind of relieving to know that we can't just, people don't just want to do this stuff on their own. They want the social element. They, you know, they want the sights, smells, and sounds of like actually being there, right? It does matter. It's different. Anybody who's watching baseball right now, like I am, you can do, like, with the fake crowd noise and all the cardboard cutouts. I mean, you can tell it's a radically different experience. One of the other takeaways is this was a really great way to reach new audiences. A vast majority of those who participated had never been to a BikeMN event in the past. So our numbers weren't nearly as good as we'd hoped, but we did get a number of folks who probably had never heard of our organization before, you know, and found ways to participate in something. Less is more, and I'm already failing at that because I'm talking too much. But, you know, I think we overburden people with information because we were really trying to soften the blow of canceling our events and kind of pivoting that. But that kind of came into conflict with reaching new audiences, because new audiences, they didn't really know about those events anyway. It's not something they were super into or they were planning on every year. So we really should have just like communicated this as like a new event, just try to make it straightforward and simple ways to participate. Few found the technology challenging. We didn't require any apps and stuff like that, but we did require photo uploads. We had very few complaints about that, but of course that's only from those who participated. Maybe people didn't participate because they weren't using those or weren't comfortable with that, but for the most part, we found people were satisfied with that. Oversaturation was totally an issue, you know, and I'm sure many of you as well, like I'm sure your inboxes were bursting with opportunities for virtual events and sign up and things like that. Otherwise, super surprising. I say this is the most shocking one to me. Prizes aren't everything. That was not a huge motivator for people. We had amazing prizes. We gave away a lot of money in bike shop credits and things like that. Did not seem to be a huge motivator for people. But that being said, major takeaway is we want to keep doing this in some way, shape, or form. And we're looking at really those successes of reaching new audiences, having a free event that we're not necessarily trying to do some fundraising. You know, we hear the word friend raiser. You know, we're trying to build our network. We want more people engaged in our advocacy and stuff like that. So the only ways that somebody can participate in an organization like ours isn't necessarily financial. There are lots of other ways you can participate, lots of ways that like we need to build coalitions and alliances. And we also need to be listening to our community, finding out what it is that motivates them, what their interests are, and making sure that we are serving them too. And this is a good way to build upon that. So yeah, I'm sure there are, well, I imagine there are a question or two, but I can't remember mine. Do I have more slides? Oh yeah, well, this is just general reminders. So we, in our, you know, continual effort to offer fun, free events, we do offer trivia every month. It's been a really fun way for Maya and I and some others on staff to try and put together some fun questions for people. We do that over Zoom too, so you can be anywhere in the state, participate, and you know, win some kind of fun prizes and things like that. Maya really likes it when I talk about celebrities who bike and stuff like that and all their drama. So anyway, yeah, that's the fourth Thursday of the month. So I'll be coming up on the 24th. And then I think we had one more. Oh yes, which segues nicely into our other somewhat virtual event, and that's the Mankato River Ramble. DIY, do it yourself, of course. So yeah, the crew who kind of organizes this was particularly bummed that that we had to cancel the in-person event here. But all month long, if you ride some of the routes in Mankato in October, you can just post that you did it. It's all honor system kind of thing, and and there are some prizes available for that as well. So it's a little bit more scaled down than the BikeMN Classic, which you could do anywhere. They do want folks to go to Mankato for it, but definitely something worth checking out. And of course, it's a beautiful area, this time of year too. So yeah, there's more information about that on our website on the event page too.
Thanks, Ted. And this is really just a cool reminder about the time of the year that we're in and how we like to be outside and experience the changing of the season. So this is a statewide network of leaders that are joining today. So if the leaves are already changing or falling off the trees, head south in October and you'll get to check out some more beautiful colors here in Minnesota. So thanks for your presentation. Ted, we have a couple of comments in the chat box here, and I'll tag team with Maya to double this, since she's screen sharing right now. We have a comment from Michelle Pearson. So this is about virtual events and what happened different in 2020. She says that I work with the Gitchigami Trail Association, and we had to cancel our annual supported ride on the trail. We opted to call our ride this year our Alterna Ride, which was a ride anywhere, any distance ride, and it was successful. So congratulations, Michelle, on pivoting to something new this year and making it a success. There's also another comment here in the chat box from Mark. Participation in a virtual event can pay great dividends when prizes are offered. I took advantage of a virtual event with an option to win a tablet. 4 people participated, so by participating, I enhanced my odd and won a tablet. Congratulations, Mark. So prizes do count sometimes. Ted mentioned it wasn't a huge driver, but we're happy that people have participated in whatever way that they chose to participate this year and shared some fantastic photos.
Yeah, and I was just going to add too, like maybe that's something I didn't capture really well, but that engagement component, we're already seeing some really positive things from that too. Yeah, Eric, I'm sorry, the virtual pie had no flavor too. That really bummed me out as well. That's usually a highlight of the Mankato River Ramble. But yeah, so we've like reached out to some folks who have sent us some photos, because some are just we're looking really hard at them on staff. We're like, what is happening? So we'll reach out to these folks and say, hey, can you tell us a little bit more about this photo and who you're riding with? And people do want to engage on that level. They want to tell their stories. They want to tell you how they're connected to their bikes and things like that too. So yeah, I think that there's going to be more we're still going to get out of this event too.
Natalie, I think you're muted.
Thanks, Maya. I muted myself instead of unmuting when I went to start. So basically, let's see, Ted mentioned about new audiences and reaching new audiences with this event this year. So maybe some of the other folks who have participated in events or held events this year have experienced that same thing, where you're friend raising, as Ted mentioned, to reach new folks and to increase engagement. Today we've been continuing the conversation about incorporating equity in everything that we do. In August we talked about education. In September now we're talking about the encouragement aspect through events. And even though we most of us would love to be riding in a large group of people and enjoying the pie and doing those types of things. 2020 has brought with it challenges to do that. So I really appreciate the stories that both Ted and Russell have shared today about ways that that you have helped to bridge that barrier to make it accessible and to help people to be able to participate. So I want to just do two more things today. One is I'll pause for some questions for either Russell or Ted, any additional questions you might have for Ted or any other questions you might have thought of that you'd like to ask Russell. And then I want to close with a roundtable. I have a couple of questions that I'd like to introduce to the participants today to discuss a little bit more about events in 2020 and some things that may have been barriers. What are some creative solutions you've done, and what do we want to do looking to the future that we might be able to sustain some of these events in a little bit different way. So I'll pause for a moment. Does anyone in the chat box or on audio have a question for either Russell or for Ted? I don't see anything in the chat box, but I do, I want to just remind people, as I just recently remembered myself, thanks Maya, that you need to unmute yourself to go on and ask a question. So you may be joining me from laptops today. We talked about the devices people were using. If you're joining by phone, you can also do that. That's something that we do offer through Zoom for these webinars so that you can participate if you have a phone and you want to log in and join us. So I will close today with a couple of roundtable questions. And the first one that I want to ask is about what are the barriers to riding? What are the barriers to hosting virtual events this year? What kind of challenges did you encounter when you tried to maybe pivot to something not in person, but something different, but doing some type of event to offer to your community members? So Ted mentioned some of the things that, BikeMN did to tackle, some of those challenges that as working through that, we tried to overcome and offer in the most, equitable way possible. But other folks that are on here, leaders from across the state of Minnesota, what things did you struggle with this year with your events that you maybe did in a creative way that was a little bit different in 2020? And I'll go ahead and just mention something. We have someone in the chat box here, Mark, who has shared a comment. So I'll go ahead and share that with the group here. First time events will bring out the creativity of the creative and future events. The first week's ABC check had me thinking of a way to photograph myself checking the air in my tires with the commercial jet taking off or landing in the background. Always always an interesting, ambiance for these types of things. So that's kind of fun. That's a fun share.
Hi, this is Karen from SHIP in West Central Minnesota, and we have in Henning, Minnesota, we have a community health action team, and we had canceled the bike rodeo, but they decided they wanted to go ahead, so they did it where kids could, if they watched safety videos on Facebook, their name got put into a drawing for a new bike. And they gave away 6 bikes, and we made sure helmets were there. And 32 kids actually watched the videos and got their name put into the hat for those 6 bikes. And then we gave away 27. We didn't. SHIP didn't, but the people of that chat team gave away the 27 helmets. So I thought that was a really creative way for them to do it. The one barrier would be is who do you suppose those 32 kids were? Probably none of them were kids of low income, but I don't know that for sure. And a normal bike rodeo in Henning last year had 90 kids. I would say at least 25% of those kids were low income.
Thanks for sharing that, Karen. And that's from Henning, Minnesota. What was the promotional difference as far as reaching out to people, the outreach that may have been a little bit different in 2020 compared to other previous years?
Well, I think they probably sent home a flyer with kids in previous years because we always had it in May. And so this way they wouldn't have had a flyer that could go home with kids because it was in August. So that would have been a difference. So they really sent out a lot of online, like Facebook postings and word of mouth. They put something in the newspaper, but they did that previous years too. People do actually still read the newspaper in Henning, Minnesota.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, and it's just as we think about looking to the future in 2021 and how we might do this in future years, what have we learned from offering these events in different ways? So for the bike rodeo in Henning, I think, having 32 was a wonderful showing, and that's awesome that you had some donated bikes you were able to give away. But thank you for doing that, Karen, and thanks for sharing your story. So we had a share in the chat box from Luke Ewald from Jackson, Minnesota. He shares that I did a 68-mile bike ride as part of the makeshift Ragbri ride in July. However, I had no real motivation for biking races or riding rides. Ragbri and other events were canceled earlier in the year, so I didn't do much with race training. So yeah, that's a good comment too, to just kind of who can ride, how much training do you have to ride, and who can participate in the ride. So I know at least with BikeMN, we were really trying to make sure that people could participate regardless of fitness level or what you had available to you as far as your kit or gear or things like that. Just make sure it's welcoming for everyone who wanted to participate. So other comments, other people that are on the webinar that would like to share any barriers to events this year, solutions that you came up with that were creative and unique to 2020, and anything that you might want to do differently looking to the future in 2021. Would you like to continue the event as you did this year in its new creative format, or would you do things differently next year?
So Natalie, I could share what we're doing in Woodbury right now, and this is kind of just a grassroots effort, but we've got two activities. One is we've curated a Strava club for Woodbury, and we've got now 161 people in the Strava club, and typically in a week we'll have over 100 people submit rides in that, and so we're doing that. It's been kind of a fun way of encouraging folks to do that, to ride in Woodbury. And the other thing we did is we started on Facebook a photo tag, and within the boundaries of Woodbury, the idea is that you have to take a picture of your bike someplace, and the first picture started it off, and then what someone else has to do is find that place, take a picture of their bike there, then they get the tag, and then they move it somewhere else. And it's something that's going on. St. Paul has one, and there's also kind of a metro area one, but we got one going in Woodbury. That hasn't taken off as much as the Strava group has. We maybe only have 6 or 8 people participating in that. I was hoping to get more families to do that, but people keep putting the tag out at the fringes of the city boundaries, and so it's harder for kids and families to get out there.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for sharing a couple of creative ideas for things that you're doing in Woodbury this year. And those are great to hear about. And like you mentioned, lessons learned. Was there a hashtag that you guys were using for the photo tag?
There isn't a hashtag. You just the Woodbury, the group is just called Woodbury Bicycle Photo Tag, and people post the pictures on Facebook. Facebook is the vehicle for controlling it. Okay,
what a cool idea. I know I hadn't heard anyone offering yet. And thanks for sharing that, because I hadn't heard that was going on in Woodbury. So that's great to hear.
But we stole it from St. Paul and thought it would be fun, and it's proved to be fun for a handful of people. I hope to get more in it.
Okay, anyone from St. Paul on the call that might want to give a nod to the photo tag work that you guys are doing? Thanks for sharing that. So we have a couple of chats in the chat box here. We have Ted mentioning that Zwift is going to be huge this fall, winter, and spring. And Luke likes your photo tag contest, Peter, so maybe this will be ripples to other communities throughout the state. This is wonderful to share these strategies, these ideas amongst the leadership network here on this webinar to share with other people who might not have thought about these things and now might implement these things in your community. So let's see here. There's another comment here. Peter, you'll have to let us know when you get St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Woodbury tags on the same day. So healthy competition. Right, so thanks, Peter. Anyone else want to share anything that you guys did in 2020 and you know, any other solutions, creative ways that you've tried to get people, encourage them to continue riding during COVID, during the social distancing, what you might want to do in the future, either continue or change?
Hey, Natalie, I just want to mention regarding your earlier question about barriers. So the Minnesota Cycling Center had STEM programming in the Minneapolis school systems. And because of the distance learning, we were unable to hold those STEM classes because they were held indoors. And because of the uncertainty initially, you know, they were just canceled. Then we were looking at potential alternatives, but you know, the schools are so busy with juggling distance learning versus hybrid learning and whatever, that they don't really have time to deal with these extracurricular classes. So we're kind of on hold until we can figure out a solution. We've been talking about creating some videos and putting some of the content on videos, but again, that takes time to create that content, and we have not really started that yet.
Thanks for sharing, Eric. Yeah, that sounds a little bit frustrating, you know, because you want to get those kids engaged and participating in the program, but you also want them to be safe. So it's, you know, grappling with how to roll that out or suspend it and hopefully get it rolling again at some point in the future. So we have one other comment here in the chat box from Mark: bike-friendly yard signs, either from a bike club or from BikeMN. If you find a yard sign, you will have found a new friend or future biking buddy. So that's fun. I know in some places people have put up signs in windows, making it, you know, a little bit more participatory for anyone who may be in a complex or condominium or whatnot. In addition to putting yard signs up. I know that was kind of a big deal. And then there's, you know, I hadn't heard anyone mention this yet today, but I know some people have been using chalk to connect with community members and stay connected. So I don't know if anyone else was doing any type of chalk drawings or tagging in addition to the yard signs or pictures in the windows, but those are other things I've heard about as well. Strategies to stay connected and keep riding during COVID. So thank you everyone for sharing these things. And is there anyone else on the call that wanted to respond to potential ideas or brainstorming about how to overcome the barriers? I know Eric mentioned this one with the STEM program and the indoor piece. Did anyone else on the call today want to respond with any ideas, strategies, suggestions, things like that? We have just a couple of minutes if you wanted to brainstorm anything or share things that you found that did work in your community that might be considered in others.
I liked the idea that was posted about having people, you know, instead of doing the bike rodeo where they had the, you know, safety videos and had the kids watch those, and it got some engagement, even though it may not have been as successful as the bike rodeo. That seemed like a good suggestion. And, you know, we just have to look for alternatives and So far, we've been kind of going around in circles and creating ideas, but shooting them down. And I think we just need to start trying some things and see what works and what doesn't.
That's great. That's good encouragement too, just among the group that's on the webinar today and anyone who might be listening to the replay. Try something, see what works, see what doesn't work, share with your friends and other leaders across the state of Minnesota, and let's get those strategies and ideas of things that are working shared with other folks. We still have a lot of riding to do yet this fall as the leaves are changing, and as Ted mentioned, the Mankato River Ramble, that's something you could participate in if you would like to do so, and you know, other opportunities to ride wherever you are in the state of Minnesota. So thank you so much for joining the webinar today. Thanks for talking about events and about some of the equity components and bridging that digital divide to help make these events accessible. And
Natalie, can I make one announcement? Since I think
Sure.
we have a minute yet. Just that what we're doing different this year in 2020 regarding our Walk Bike Fun educator trainings that we usually hold around the state in person for teachers and educators is that we are doing a 3-part training series. Part 1 is online learning, and the second is virtual training via Zoom, and the third part is in-person limited audience with on the bike training. And so this is something that we're just developing and are taking our time to do it right. And I know that there's been a lot of requests out there for what are we doing for Walk Bike Fun teacher trainings this fall. And so I just wanted to put that out there for people because I know that there's been a lot of questions, and this will be interesting for us to try and bridge the digital divide for our Walk Bike Fun trainings. And so we're going to be cognizant of being able to get past that and still provide training to educators who are requesting that. Email me if you have any other questions about it.
Thanks, Michelle. And just a reminder before I sign off today, we're going to have our next Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network webinar on Wednesday, October 21st. From 11:30 to 12:30 here on Zoom again. And we're really excited to welcome Ken McLeod, Policy Director at the League of American Bicyclists, who will be discussing data collection and equity in data collection. He has a few things to share around that, and then also how the League is responding to some of the calls for social justice. So that should be very interesting and timely, and we'll be welcoming him to our webinar in October. So thank you everyone for joining the webinar today. I appreciate the time that you've taken to participate in this discussion. And as Michelle mentioned, email us or reach out by phone if you have any questions or would like to follow up with either of the speakers. We'll get you connected. Thanks. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.